Well, of course, I'm very concerned. And of course, our position is the same. We condemn what Iran did last week by attacking Israel in an unprecedented way. And we were all reassured that there was no loss of innocent lives. At the same time, we absolutely need to make sure that this does not become a full-scale war, and that's why we need a ceasefire.
Escalating fears tonight, as you heard there, of a broader regional war in the Middle East, with Israel continuing strikes against Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, overnight striking central Beirut for the first time since the 2006 war. Those strikes follow Iran launching almost 200 ballistic missiles at Israel, earlier this week. Canada's embassy in Beirut estimates there are at least 45,000 Canadians in Lebanon right now. Here's a breakdown of the numbers. 24,530 Canadians are officially registered with Global Affairs. Over the past several days, Global Affairs has contacted 20,000 of those, with 4,000 requesting information on options to get out of the country. Canada is not offering assisted departures at this time, but is working to secure additional seats for Canadians, permanent residents, and their immediate family members on commercial flights out of Lebanon. Today, 650 seats were made available, and tomorrow, more than 4,000 seats are set to become available. Bill Blair is Canada's Defence Minister. Hi, Minister Blair. Good to see you as always. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah, of course, Vassy. Happy to be with you.
I wanted to start off with a question about your government's position on the war in the Middle East itself, and in particular the conflict between Iran and Israel. I note that the Prime Minister, after Iran launched those ballistic missiles at Israel, said that Israel has a right to defend itself. And I wondered if you could qualify for Canadians listening. Does that mean that Israel has the right to shoot those missiles out of the sky or defend them with the Iron Dome? Or does it mean that Israel has the right to retaliate?
Yeah, to be very clear, we unequivocally condemn the escalation that was perpetrated by Iran firing those missiles at Israel. That's completely unacceptable. And certainly, Israel as a sovereign nation has every right to defend itself, certainly defend themselves from the incoming missiles, but also to respond in a calibrated and proportional way, in order to make sure that they're not, further victimized by an unprovoked attack as this one was by Iran.
So your position is, if I could interpret it correctly, that they do have a right, that Israel does have a right to retaliate, but that it should be proportional.
Well, and retaliation, I think, needs to be, carefully considered, because that isn't the purpose of a military response from Israel, but rather to diminish Iran's ability to continue to attack them. I think that's part of their right of defense. What's the difference? What delineation are you drawing? Well, I think that where Iran still has a capacity to continue to launch unprovoked attacks against Israel, Israel has a right not only to knock those missiles down from the sky, but to target the source of those missiles to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So is that, in your view, the sort of threshold for what you could or the federal government would endorse as far as the retaliation go? And I'll tell you why I'm asking. A number of questions, for example, have been directed at the U.S. president around whether or not the U.S. would back Israel striking Iran's nuclear facilities or their oil facilities. Am I to draw from what you just qualified that Canada would not support those actions? No, and in fact, I've tried to be very careful in how I've explained our position on this, Vassy. I believe that Israel has a right to defend itself. That defense should not be simply limited at their border as their missiles are being fired at them. I think that their ability to diminish Iran's capacity to fire those missiles at them is part of their right of defense. I do not believe that frankly, we're not endorsing and supporting retaliation against other targets, only at those targets that might be necessary for Israel to defend itself against further attack. At the same time, there's a lot of eyes, particularly here in Canada, on the number of Canadians who are in Lebanon as the conflict between Hezbollah and Israel increases. We spoke over the weekend about the possibility of Canada having to evacuate, of your government having to evacuate tens of thousands of Canadians. And I wanted to get some more information from you on what the threshold is from your perspective, from even the military's perspective, about when that becomes not just a possibility, but something that needs to happen. What are you watching for in order to make that determination? Well, a number of things. First of all, Global Affairs Canada has the lead on making sure that we are able to provide services to Canadians living abroad, and in particular in Canadians' permanent residents and their families in Lebanon. Right now, we are making available and assisting Canadians to make arrangements to get on commercial flights. The airport's still open. About 60 flights a day are leaving from the airport in Beirut, mostly Middle East airlines. Canada even has gone so far as to contract seats on those planes and making them available to Canadians who have indicated to us that they would like assistance in departure. And so that help, Global Affairs is already providing that. Global Affairs came to us months ago and said that given the concerns about escalating violence in the region, particularly in southern Lebanon, they wanted the Canadian Armed Forces to be prepared to provide assistance should that assistance be requested by Canadians in the region as facilitated by Global Affairs. And so we've been preparatory to that request, deploying resources, making arrangements, and putting things in place. We've been fairly fortunate in that regard, in that we've had a number of months, and during that period of time, Global Affairs has been advising Canadians in the region to leave the region, and very strong travel advisories suggesting people should not go there, and those who are there, it would be prudent to leave. We are, right now, helping Canadians get on commercial flights that are available. If that situation changes, Global Affairs will make a request for assistance from the Canadian military, and with the advice and the help that we've already received in the region from Global Affairs, we've done a lot of work to put resources in place. We have a scalable response depending on what the situation requires, and we will be prepared to assist Canadians to get to a place of safety if and when they require that.
I think if I understand your comments that if, for example, primarily the airport were to shut down, there'd be no commercial means to get out. Is that the threshold at which you anticipate Global Affairs would ask for the military's assistance?
Well, again, it is really contingent upon Canadians in the region. We're not forcing them to leave. We're advising them they should, but it's their decision. And for a number of reasons, some people have not chosen to leave the region. But if the circumstances deteriorate, and that could be a result of an increase in hostility, a land invasion into Lebanon, bombing into populated areas, for example, in the Bekaa Valley or in Beirut, all of those things could precipitate a greater number of Canadians seeking to leave. And if we lose the option of commercial airlines as the primary means of egress, we have some other options available to us. But that will be scalable, again, based on what Canadians require from us. That could involve, departure by land. It could be departure by marine. There's a number of things that the Canadian Armed Forces has been preparing to provide support when GAC tells us that Canadians in the region need it.
Yeah, I think primarily what precipitated my question is actually what happened overnight and the strike that happened just, hundreds of yards from what I read from a number of Western embassies right in Beirut, and whether or not that essentially changes the calculation. When you talk about the resources that could be deployed, I think you had mentioned over the weekend there were 154 additional personnel who were sent in over the last, over a recent period. Have there been any additions to that? Just as we see these tensions escalate, particularly in light of what Iran did a few days ago, what more is Canada kind of preparing for there? And if you could be specific about resources, please.
Yeah, of course. And first of all, we did put 150 people just this past weekend into the region. And when I say in the region, it's not just all in Lebanon. I've got personnel in Cyprus because we need, if it becomes necessary, to take people from Lebanon. Cyprus is one of the likely places, a place of safety that we would take them. We're also working very closely with Turkey because a number of flights are going into Istanbul. And of course, we have personnel in the region, and including in Lebanon. I know our Chief of Defence has been working very closely with Global Affairs, making sure that we have the personnel that may be required. And it's a scalable response. We've also staged other assets, both naval and aerial, in the region that are not in Lebanon, but making sure that we have them available to us if and when they are required. Vassy, I want to assure Canadians, we learned our lessons of 2006. We have pre-positioned a lot of assets. There's been an enormous amount of planning and preparation should those resources be required to assist Canadians. We've also been able to work with regional governments, including the Lebanese government, to get permissions for our people to be in country, to do the work that may become necessary. I think we all remain hopeful, and that further conflict could be avoided. Canada continues to call for a ceasefire, continues to call for a negotiated solution. But if those calls go unheeded, We want to make sure that we are there for Canadians, and that's our responsibility. Canada, our nation has a responsibility to Canadians at home and abroad. When they need our help, we'll be ready to provide that help.